The dawn of December 17th, 1944, broke with a biting chill over Belgium. A dense mist clung to the frozen road, shrouding the surrounding fields and low-lying forests in ghostly grey. The silence of the morning was almost oppressive, broken only by the crunch of tires on ice and the faint, distant rumble of artillery echoing from the Ardennes. A lone jeep approached a checkpoint, its engines subdued, wheels barely making a sound on the frost-hardened ground. As the vehicle slowed to a stop, a military policeman emerged from the shadows, his breath visible in the frigid air, curling into vapor before disappearing. Inside the jeep, 3 men sat, clad in crisp American uniforms. Every detail seemed perfect. The patches sewn with care, the rifles polished and correct, even the accents carried the cadence of a native speaker. Yet despite the outward appearances, something intangible lingered in their eyes, a hardness, a foreign calculation that unsettled Sergeant William Creel. Creel had been warned about the nightmare scenario, one that defied all the accepted rules of combat and honor. German soldiers disguised as Americans, infiltrating Allied lines, sowing confusion and striking from within. He stepped closer, his hand resting near his sidearm, and demanded the password. The 3 men faltered. Their English, though carefully rehearsed, cracked and splintered under the scrutiny, brittle like ice underfoot. Creel's gaze shifted to their weapons, and his heart sank with the recognition of subtle but deadly inconsistency. The rifles they carried were not American. They were British Sten guns, firearms no genuine American patrol would ever possess. In that instant, Creel knew the danger was real, that the nightmare had arrived. Within minutes, the 3 men were apprehended. Beneath their olive-drab jackets, the familiar tan and green of German field-grey uniforms emerged, a stark confirmation of their deceit. Their names were Unreizier Manfred Peruse, Oberenrich Gunther Billing, and Gerrit Wilhelm Schmidt, soon to be etched into history as some of the most infamous prisoners of the Battle of the Bulge. Their capture sent a ripple of anxiety through the Allied lines, unlike anything seen before, creating a climate of suspicion and distrust. Every soldier became both watcher and watched. Every checkpoint became a gauntlet, a test of identity, loyalty, and knowledge. The simple act of passing through now demanded proof, not only of uniform, but of cultural familiarity, of shared experience. The tale of deception, however, began months earlier on October 22, 1944, deep within the fortified headquarters of Adolf Hitler in Rostenburg, East Prussia. The Führer summoned SS Commando Otto Skorzeny, a man whose exploits had already attained near mythical status within the ranks of the Wehrmacht. Skorzeny had orchestrated the daring glider assault that freed Benito Mussolini from his mountaintop prison and masterminded the kidnapping of the Hungarian regent's son to ensure Hungary remained aligned with the Axis powers. This new mission, though, would test the limits of ingenuity, courage, and audacity in ways even Skorzeny had never faced. Hitler outlined his plan, a massive counter-offensive through the Ardennes, a lightning strike intended to fracture the Allied armies, seize momentum lost after the retreat from France, and create the conditions for a decisive victory. Speed and deception were critical. The Germans had to reach the bridges over the Meuse River before the Allies could destroy them, cutting off retreat and reinforcement routes. Skorzeny's elite men would disguise themselves in American and British uniforms, infiltrating behind enemy lines to sabotage communications, misdirect troop movements and spread chaos through rumor and misperception. Even Skorzeny hesitated. He understood the grave consequences. Under the Hague Convention, soldiers captured while wearing enemy uniforms could be executed as spies. Yet Hitler dismissed such concerns with unwavering certainty. "You will change before you fight," he commanded. "It is not dishonor, it is war." Within days, Skorzeny began assembling Panzer Brigade 150. He requested over 3,000 men fluent in English, an ideal that proved nearly impossible to meet. Of the 2,500 soldiers who eventually reported, only 10 spoke English fluently. A few could carry on basic conversation, while the remainder knew merely enough to respond yes, no, or sorry. Those weakest in the language were given grim instructions. If captured, feign illness, clutch the stomach, and pretend to suffer from diarrhea. Equipment, too, was a source of frustration. Requests for Shermans and Jeeps to blend seamlessly with Allied forces were largely ignored. Instead, the men received German Panthers painted olive drab with hastily applied white stars, effective only under the concealment of darkness or from a distance. Authentic American uniforms were scarce, rationed to small commando teams. Some were blood-stained, others ill-fitting, yet the men resolved to embody their roles flawlessly. Every detail was scrutinized and rehearsed. The Commandos immersed themselves in American culture, studying military ranks, the cadence of speech, and even the casual gestures and habits of U.S. soldiers. They watched Hollywood films, memorized state capitals, baseball team rosters, and the names of movie stars. They practiced walking, chewing gum, and slouching in a way that would pass undetected as genuine. By mid-December, Operation Greif, named for the griffin, a symbol of vigilance and cunning, was ready. Skorzeny's disguised units would infiltrate behind the main German thrust, aiming to capture key bridges before they could be destroyed. At dawn on December 16th, the Ardennes ignited in a surge of violence and movement. Over 200,000 German troops advanced through the fog-shrouded forests, their armor cutting through the mist like steel predators. The initial shock was devastating. American lines buckled, communication lines faltered, and chaos spread across the battlefield. Amid this maelstrom, Skorzeny's camouflaged commandos moved undetected behind the front lines, driving captured jeeps, waving American flags, and blending seamlessly into the chaos, an invisible hand guiding panic and misdirection. For a fleeting moment, the plan appeared to succeed. One team diverted an entire convoy along the wrong route. Others spread false rumors of breakthroughs and encirclements. Road signs were reversed, telephone lines severed, and bridges were sabotaged, creating confusion among Allied units. Yet by December 17th, progress faltered. Determined resistance at Elsenborn Ridge and St. Vith slowed the German advance. Cut off from the rapid movements of the main force, Skorzeny's men found themselves stranded, deep in hostile territory, vulnerable and exposed. Then came the checkpoint at Iwa, the one that would alter the course of the operation. The captured infiltrators confessed during intense interrogations, their revelations cascading through the Allied ranks. Rumors erupted. German agents could be anywhere, even inside headquarters. One prisoner falsely claimed the ultimate target was General Dwight D. Eisenhower himself. Panic spread like wildfire. Eisenhower was sequestered inside his Versailles headquarters, surrounded not by enemy troops, but by the protective fear of his own men. Checkpoints proliferated overnight. Every soldier was scrutinized, every accent tested. How could one distinguish friend from foe? The answer lay in culture. MPs began posing questions about American life. The capital of Illinois, the 1940 World Series champion, the name of Mickey Mouse's girlfriend. Hesitation, stammering, or incorrect answers could result in immediate detainment, sometimes at gunpoint. The consequences were absurd, yet deadly serious. General Omar Bradley was detained because an MP doubted Springfield as Illinois' capital. British officers were arrested for failing to identify American baseball teams. Convoys halted for hours as MPs quizzed drivers on Hollywood films and radio programs. Some soldiers, offended or frustrated, responded sarcastically and were themselves taken into custody. What began as a tactical infiltration had paralyzed an entire army. Roads clogged, reinforcements delayed, fear replaced trust. Yet the Germans failed to achieve their objectives. Bridges remained intact, and the element of surprise evaporated. Infiltrators were hunted down systematically. Captured men faced rapid trials under international law. Wearing enemy uniforms in wartime carried the death penalty. On December 21st, 1944, the first trial was held. Perouse, Billing, and Schmidt were found guilty and sentenced to death. 2 days before Christmas, blindfolded, they were executed by firing squad. 13 more would meet the same fate before the year's end. Operation Greif was effectively concluded. Stripped of disguise, Skorzeny's brigade fought conventionally. He himself was wounded by artillery fire, but survived, surrendering in May 1945. In 1947, Skorzeny faced charges mirroring those that condemned his men. A surprise witness, a British commando, revealed that Allied forces had employed similar deception tactics. The court ruled that wearing enemy uniforms for infiltration, rather than direct combat, did not breach the laws of war. Skorzeny was acquitted. His executed men could not appeal. Operation Greif had failed to seize a single bridge or materially alter the Battle of the Bulge. Yet its legacy was far more insidious. It destroyed trust. Soldiers questioned the loyalty of their comrades even in the midst of combat. Churchill would later note that the Battle of the Bulge was the greatest American battle of the war. Yet beneath that triumph lay days of chaos. Born from one audacious idea, deception could bend the rules of warfare. The paranoia created by Skorzeny's Commandos became legend. Baseball questions, Hollywood trivia, and impromptu identity tests entered folklore as evidence that cultural knowledge could outweigh even camouflage. Being American was defined not by uniform or accent alone, but by shared experience, the cadence of speech, the memory of baseball games, radio programs, movies, and slang that could not be mimicked by training. The enduring lesson of Operation Greif is clear. Deception may confuse, but it cannot win wars. Cultural fluency, identity, and trust are forged not in classrooms, not in mimicry, but in life itself, absorbed and shared across generations. On that frozen Belgian road, when Sergeant William Creel demanded the password and heard hesitation instead of certainty, history shifted. The deception ended, and the truth, like the pale morning sun breaking through the mist, began to pierce the fog.